15 years ago, my life was almost perfect. And then the doctor told me that I had cancer. As soon as I heard the C word, it was as if life was saying no to me. I decided then that I had to get past that no and say yes to the rest of my life.
Every day I wake up, I'm in pain, right? I gotta swing my legs off the side of the bed. I gotta get in this wheelchair. I have to say yes every single day.
But when I met you, you were with the chief of police of the police department that not only shot you, but did so with impunity. So you gotta come a little closer to reality for me.
One of the questions I would ask God over and over, if you was gonna allow me to survive, why would you take my ability to walk away?
I am DeForest B. Soares Jr. This is Say Yes When Life Says No. Each one of us has a challenge in our lives, and sometimes the challenge is so intense that we feel as though life has shut down and life has said no. Can you imagine having your father go to jail when you're a child, having your sister die, being shot 5 times by the police? These are just a few examples of how life said no to our guest today, Leon Ford. However, Leon responded to all of that trauma and more by doing things with his life that few people have ever done. I want you to be inspired and informed by this marvelous story of saying yes when life said no.
In 2012, a simple traffic stop in Pittsburgh turned into tragedy. Mistaken for another man, 19-year-old Leon Ford, unarmed, full of life, was shot 5 times by a police officer. The bullets left him paralyzed, but not broken. Leon refused to let pain write his story. Instead, he transformed it. From victim to visionary, he rose as an activist, author, and motivational speaker, a voice for justice, healing, and reconciliation. Then, in an extraordinary act of courage, Leon chose dialogue over division. He sat down face to face with Pittsburgh Police Chief Scott Schubert, the leader of the department connected to the officer who shot him. Conversations that could have fueled anger, instead, planted seeds of forgiveness and a vision for change. Out of that moment emerged the HERE Foundation, a nonprofit reimagining what community and policing can look like when accountability, dialogue, and humanity lead the way, building trust, breaking barriers, and creating spaces for hard conversations where silence once prevailed. Leon Ford's story proves resilience is stronger than bullets, courage is louder than hate, and healing, when claimed with intention and deliberation, is not passive, it is powerful.
Welcome to the studio now, where we have one of my heroes. If someone were to ask me to name the top 5 people that I admire in the world, this man would be in the top 5. Welcome, Leon Ford, to Say Yes When Life Says No. I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. You're also one of my heroes.
Well, it's Mutual Admiration Society. Leon, I want to just cut straight to the critical question that's asked about you. I don't know if people ask you to your face or behind your back, but when you've been shot by the police and then you go to working with the police, doesn't that make you a sellout?
Not at all. It makes you innovative and creative. And, you know, I think oftentimes it's a response to go out and protest and do all the things that we see on the news. And I did those things, right, out of anger and frustration without guidance. And then something happened. My grandfather challenged me. And my grandfather's a veteran. He could be quite the stoic. And one day he said to me, Leon, it's really cool that you got all these Instagram followers and you're getting all these retweets on Twitter. But do you want to make a point or do you want to make a difference? And I thought about that, and he proceeded to say, LJ, who's my son, Leon Jr., he said one day he's going to be 16-year-old driving in Pittsburgh, and he's going to be stopped by a police officer. What is the work you're doing today? How is that going to affect the outcome of a traffic stop for him? Is it going to make it better or is it going to make it worse? And I thought about that. I was selling T-shirts that said, "Cops, criminals on patrol." I was shutting down the streets. My friends were getting arrested for protesting. And I thought, man, this may make his experience worse because we have the same name, and I began to think about how can I truly make a difference in a way that is sustainable, right? That will affect the way young black men and women were treated by police officers, not just next year, but in 10 years, 20 years.
Okay, so before we get to the real juicy part, I just have to ask this because when I started out as an activist, there were two things I did regularly. Number one, voter registration, because I wanted people to vote and by voting put better people in office. And number two was protest police brutality. I mean, I literally led a sit-in in a mayor's office in response to a police shooting. And that protest was based on the fact that the cop shot the kid, but they wouldn't even suspend the cop without pay. So where does justice come in? I know you want sustainable solutions. I know you want reconciliation, but there are bad cops in this country.
Absolutely.
So what do you say to those who are really focused on getting the bad apples out of the barrel?
Okay, so this is going to be kind of a long answer to
That's
that.
all right,
right?
we got time.
Because there's something that happened between your generation, my parents' generation, and my generation, right? In regards to civic leadership. Okay, so my generation, we were taught, the nonviolent discourse, right? The protests and things like that. But we weren't taught what happens on the backside of that. Right? The actual work. So, it's easy for us to put something on Twitter or Facebook or something and go out there and say, yo, we need everybody to meet up at this corner, and we have 1,000 people show up, right? But the work behind that wasn't happening. And so what I realized is when I got shot, I was 19 years old. I wasn't registered to vote. I couldn't tell you who my state rep was. Couldn't tell you who not one city council person was. I likely didn't even know who the mayor was when I was 19 years old.
But what did you know? I mean, at 19, that's the list of things you didn't know, but you did know you were living a life.
I was living a life.
Doing what?
I was a auto body mechanic. I was boxing, right? And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, right?
In Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh, right? Going to college parties, right? Just having a good time,
right?
And once I got shot and I started to have these protests and things.
But wait, but
okay.
You went from getting shot to protest.
Yeah.
How did you get shot?
So it was a traffic stop. So the date was November 11th, 2012. I was leaving my house to go to my grandmother's house for Sunday dinner. And I had stopped at my cousin's house on the way. When I was leaving my cousin's house, I began to drive down a one-way street the correct way. There was a police cruiser coming up the wrong way, down the one-way street, no lights on, no sirens. And as we crossed paths, I looked at them, they looked at me, and I knew I was going to get pulled over. When they stopped me, I gave them my driver's license, registration, and car insurance. Officer immediately snatched it. He was rude from the beginning of the traffic stop. He ran my name in the system. The car was registered to me. The car had insurance. I had a driver's license. And so instead of issuing me a ticket, he decides that I was lying about my identity. And he told me, you're not Leon Ford, you're lying. You're Lamont Ford, and I had no relative named Lamont Ford. Didn't know Lamont Ford, and so I was confused. And so this, it goes from him, interrogating me to harassing me to threatening me. Traffic stop lasted about 20 minutes. And so once it escalated to the verbal threats, and racial slurs, out of fear, I told myself, man, I'm going to drive off. I'm getting out of here. And the officer did was he reached inside of my vehicle through the window, unlocked the door, opened the door, and tried to pull me out. At that moment, I drove off.
This was at night?
At night, yes. It was dark, so I drove off. What I didn't know the entire traffic stop was they called backup. And the backup was on the passenger side of the car. And so when I began to drive off, he actually jumped inside of the vehicle and shot me 5 times. So I was shot once in my neck, 2 times in my chest, once in my arm, and once in my pelvis.
You were sitting in the driver's seat?
In the driver's seat, yeah. And so if you can envision it, he jumped in the vehicle in the passenger seat, and he's literally reaching over and shooting me pretty much point blank range.
You had a weapon?
No weapon.
No weapon.
No drugs, no weapons. So I immediately...
But he thought he was shooting Lamont Ford, right?
I think he knew he was shooting Leon Ford.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think from my perspective and from sitting through the trial and everything, I think them naming Lamont Ford was just a ploy for them to try to search my vehicle.
So whatever happened to the cop who shot you?
He's still a Pittsburgh police officer.
Did he go to trial?
No, I was charged. Yeah, so he didn't get charged. I was charged. Reckless endangerment, resisting arrest, escape, aggravated assault. And
so the victim became the criminal.
Absolutely. And I was actually arraigned from my hospital bed.
Right.
Right? Like, just imagine that. Right? Imagine being shot, waking up in the hospital.
Well, first of all, if I had been shot, I wouldn't have awakened anywhere. Just the idea of being shot one time in any part of my body just traumatizes me. I can't believe that you were even strong enough to survive being shot 5 times. But then the injustice of being arraigned in your hospital bed when you're trying to recover is just double injustice.
Yeah. And so, that takes me back to me getting charged.
Right.
Civic leadership. Right. And so, I'm protesting.
Well, you should be protesting. I mean, that's protest worthy.
Absolutely. And
especially when the police officer wasn't even charged.
So I was fighting for my life, but also trying to recover.
Right.
Right. And recovery, doing physical therapy, but also mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, because I was questioning God. I was, not in a strong headspace mentally. I was wondering, one of the questions that I would ask God over and over, if you was going to allow me to survive, why would you take my ability to walk away?
Yeah.
Right? It didn't make sense to me.
At what point did you know that you wouldn't be able to walk?
So within a week of getting shot, I had no concept of time, right? And within that week, I remember being arraigned, and I remember a doctor coming into my room saying to me, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is you're going to survive. The bad news is you'll never walk again. And it just crushed me, right? Because, I didn't know what life would look like as someone who couldn't walk.
We're here under the theme of saying yes when life says no. I can't imagine life saying no more loudly than to have a doctor say you can't walk and won't be able to walk again. That is a big no. But that's not the only no you've heard in your life. We want to get to those no's later on. Listen, I'm here with Leon Ford. He is one of my heroes. He was shot 5 times by a police officer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when he was 19 years old. But that's not what makes him my hero. What makes him my hero is what he has done in response to being the victim of injustice. Don't go anywhere, because you've got to hear the rest of this story. The year that my life was doing its best was the same year I was diagnosed with cancer. My response to that diagnosis is described in this book, Say Yes When Life Says No. Go to my website, dbstories.com, pick up a copy of the book, and I hope you'll be inspired by the way I was able to get past my no and embrace my life saying yes. So now you're shot by a police officer. That's a big no, right?
Yep.
You are told by a doctor you'll never walk again. That's a big no. The police officer who shot you was never even charged, much less convicted of doing a crime. That's a big no. And then you are charged as the victim with criminal charges. So those are 4 big no's right in front of our faces, right? Today, you have a foundation. You are working with police officers. You are helping recruit, literally, young people, men and women, to go into law enforcement. Talk about how this life that you now lead grew out of the trauma that you experienced.
Yeah, so I mention my grandfather a lot because he's been my guru, my sensei, right? And I remember one time my grandfather saying to me, he's like, Leon, I have a good life. I love my wife. I travel. I own my home. I don't owe nobody nothing. He's like, I don't owe nobody, And he said, I'm going to continue to have a good life. And occasionally, I'm going to think about my grandson in Pittsburgh who got shot by a police officer. And I'm going to feel bad for you. But if you want to have a good life, that's your responsibility. It's all on you. And he said to me, I can encourage you, I can support you, but he calls it supreme accountability. He said, you're supremely accountable and responsible for your life and your happiness. So you can say, my dad went to jail, my sister died, I got shot by a police officer. You put all those things on the resume and try to, get you a job, they're gonna look at you like you crazy. Right? And he said, I'm your grandfather, I love you, but I'm not carrying your pain every day with me.
Wow.
And that lesson right there, it was like a paradigm shift, because no matter what I experienced in life, it took the blame off of everybody else and put responsibility into my hands.
Yeah, Leon, I call that a catalytic moment, meaning that when we change, when we shift in our lives, something is a catalyst to make that happen. Sometimes it's a movie, sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's an experience, and your grandfather was your catalyst. That's an amazing appreciation for that relationship, because you were still a young man. You could have said, man, my grandfather's old and crazy and irrelevant, right? But you embraced your grandfather's message. What was it about your relationship with your grandfather that enabled him to get through to you?
So growing up in Pittsburgh, so I have 2 sides of my family. My mom's side are very loving and thoughtful and compassionate. My dad's side is very raw and street and unforgiving, right? And it's that balance, right? But then my grandfather lived in Massachusetts. So he was the one that left Pittsburgh and got out, was in the military, lived in Germany. And he had a good life, right?
That's your mother's father? Or
my dad's father.
Your dad's father.
Yeah, my dad's father. And so although I do admire my father, right, but he experienced things in his life that I didn't want to experience, right, like incarceration, right. So my dad was incarcerated when I was 6 and came home when I was 19.
Wow.
Right. While he was incarcerated, my grandmother, which is his mom, and my baby sister both died. Right. So when I was at my grandfather's
There's
life,
3 more no's.
yeah,
Your sister's death, your grandmother's death, and your father's incarceration. So
Yes,
now we're up
sir.
to 7 no's before you're even 20 years old.
yeah. And my granddad, his life just was functional. He loved his wife, no infidelity, right? Like all these things that when I thought about success, I would think about my grandfather.
Yeah, that's great.
And so when he gave me that wisdom, right, I just, it just like, it changed my world. He also told me, he said, you're experiencing the lowest moment of your life. But the good thing is, it's impossible to fall off the floor.
Right.
Right?
No place to go but up.
No
right?
place to go but up. And he's very honest and like loving, but he had these phrases that just would encourage me and make me feel seen, but also make me feel responsible, like I could do something.
Yeah, but Leon, listen. I get supreme accountability. I get no place to go but up. I get all of that. But when I met you, you were with the chief of police of the police department that never fired or even suspended the cop who shot you. I think this is a little deeper than supreme accountability and all that other stuff that your grandfather said.
Yeah.
Because you could have been accountable, responsible, but still not embraced the police department that not only shot you, but did so with impunity. So you got to come a little closer to reality for me, because I'm still not seeing it.
Yeah, so the reality is, growing up in the environment I grew up in, I've seen people get harmed by other people, and I've seen families still coincide to make a community, right, and build those relationships. And while they were complicated, people out of trust were able to do some remarkable things. Let me give you an example. When I was 14 years old, one of my good childhood friends murdered somebody, right? And he was sentenced to life in prison for that murder, was eventually resentenced to 30 years in prison. And around the time I got shot, maybe a little after I was shot, I had a mentor come into my life named Brother Jason. So Brother Jason worked for Pittsburgh Public Schools. He ran a basketball league in memory of his brother who was murdered. Well, Jason was my mentor for about 3 years before I made the connection that my friend Antoine actually murdered his brother. Right? So if you can imagine.
Did he know that?
He did not know that.
He didn't know that you had a connection.
No. And so I'm at his house.
Right.
I'm calling his mom, right? I've built a relationship with his children.
And your
with
boy
his
killed
wife,
his brother.
and who I'm still in contact with. So once I made the connection, right, I felt so guilty, right? Because how do I dare go to this man's house, build a relationship with his mom and his brother, and my friend, right, cause the worst pain of his life? And so what I did was, my boy wrote me a letter, just to me, saying like, yeah, I wish I was there to help you out, and all
After
the
you
things.
got shot.
After I was shot.
Yeah.
And I gave that letter to Jason. And I said, Jason, Antoine's a good childhood friend of mine. And within 6 months, I was taking Jason to the prison to visit Antoine, right? And now they're working on some restorative justice practices together. What's interesting about that story is, at the basketball league where Jason, ran, the Pittsburgh police wanted to have a team, right, in the league. And Jason reached out to me. And this is, again, after I was shot. And I was like, heck no, like this
Yeah.
can't happen. And Jason's looking at me and he's like, well, you know, if you're truly about healing and reconciliation, right?
Because you were trying to bring about healing between
Him
and the guy that killed his brother.
Exactly. And I did.
Right.
Right? And he challenged me on that.
You had to be consistent.
I got to be consistent. Right? And I think that there are core principles we talk about in life, whether it's through church, right, or religion, or if it's, you know, you're reading a book about happiness.
Yeah.
Right? But what happens when we're in a position where we're challenged to be about what we're talking about?
Leon, one thing I know about you is that between the time of your traumatic incident and your being proactive in pursuing your purpose, you participated in a therapeutic relationship, which for black men is sometimes considered a bit taboo. What made you decide that therapy was an important value proposition, and how did it help?
Yeah, so after all the no's in my life, losing my sister, dad going to jail, me getting shot, finding out I was paralyzed, all those things, I had this resilience, right, that sustained me through everything. So when my sister died, I didn't go to therapy. You know, dad went to jail, I didn't go to therapy. Me getting shot, I didn't go to therapy until years later, right? And this is now, you know, I'm a national activist, right? I was, you know, in Baltimore protesting with Freddie Gray and Atlanta protesting with so I'm all over the country now. I have an Instagram following. I'm talking about hope and healing and all the things. But something in me felt empty, right? I was in this deep, dark depression.
What were the signs that you noticed in yourself that meant depression?
My joy was missing, right? It usually feels good to be around me, and I just felt my attitude shifting toward people. And one day I was in a grocery store shopping, and a woman came up to me and she said, you know, Leon, I love everything you're doing. I see you. And she just gave me all this praise. Then she closed with, but the joy in your smile doesn't match the pain in your eyes. And she told me, you deserve a healthy heart.
This random woman.
A random woman. And she gave me her card. She was a therapist.
Oh.
And I saw her.
Wow.
And that's when my healing journey began.
Because you sensed that you were just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I happen to know you talk a lot about mindset because it's important for you to let people know that your mindset really can determine your outcomes.
Absolutely.
So what is it about mindset you think people should really understand and comprehend?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the lessons that I learned from my grandfather, right? If you're in the lowest moment of your life, you could say, I'm hopeless, and this happened to me, that happened. I mean, you can make so many different excuses, right? Or, right, you can embody supreme accountability. And so I think for me, that's what it means to say yes, right? When life is saying no, right? No apology, you know, no resource. Like, you have to wake up literally, every day I wake up, I'm in pain, right? I got to swing my legs off the side of the bed. I got to get in this wheelchair. I have to say yes every single day, you know, and like no excuses. So many times in our communities, people are saying, everywhere I go, whether it's New Jersey, you know, a town or city in New Jersey, or a city in Pittsburgh or Georgia, black people are saying, my city is the worst city for black people.
Right.
You know, it's like an Olympics of defeat.
Olympics of defeat.
Right? And
Yeah.
it's like they feel
Who's
defeated.
doing the worst?
Who's doing the worst? Right? And I'm like, the mindset is, how do you see the opportunities, even in the midst of adversity? Right? Because when there's adversity, there's always opportunity.
Listen, folks, we're here with Leon Ford, perhaps the only person you'll ever meet who was shot 5 times by the local police and turned that traumatic experience into a partnership with that same police department. Let's kind of tie the ribbon around from trauma to this triumphant kind of platform.
Absolutely.
That you've used in a redemptive way.
Absolutely. Oftentimes in community, right, when there are folks from outside of our communities, mainly academia, they come into our communities and they read these books, right, and we get frustrated because we like, y'all don't have the lived experience. Y'all can't just read a couple books about us and feel like y'all know us, right? Same thing with for law enforcement, right? And what I realized is that I read a bunch of books about law enforcement, but I had not spoken to any police officers.
Wow.
Right? And so I then began to build relationships with law enforcement, right? Understanding how they think, what they actually do, what are their actual roles and responsibilities. And it was life-changing for me because I realized that a lot of the police officers in Pittsburgh actually wanted the same things that the activists wanted. Mm-hmm. The language was just different, right? And so as I began to build a relationship with Chief Schubert and a few philanthropists in Pittsburgh, we began to flirt with different ideas about change, right? What can we do? And
to change the police department or to change the dynamics between the community and the police department?
Both.
Both.
Right.
But what about, can I just ask you this?
Yeah.
What about the cop who shot you? Is he a part of this love affair that you have?
No, he's not. I met with him.
Okay.
Right. And the reason why I met with him, because I took a psychology course at Duquesne University, and I also took a course called Police and Society at Duquesne University. And what I learned from the psychology course made me think about the traffic stop, right? When people are afraid, they experience fight, flight, fear, and fawn, right? And I knew I was afraid. I could tell you exactly why I was afraid.
Right.
This officer said he was afraid, right? So I was afraid, I pulled off. He was afraid.
Except he was afraid with a gun.
With a gun, and he shot me.
Right.
Right? And so I wanted to reverse engineer that and unpack it, right? And so what is the solution to fear? Safety, right? When people feel safe, right, fear doesn't exist. And so from my experience, I knew, okay, what could make me feel safe as a 19-year-old, right? But what would make a white police officer who doesn't trust or maybe not even like black people feel safe, right? And, I could read a bunch of different books about it, but talking to someone who actually shot somebody, right, is a different experience.
Did he apologize? I mean, did anything happen in this meeting?
He didn't apologize, right? But I also had enough wisdom to understand that some people just don't have the language to apologize, right? Anybody could say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But for me, him showing up,
right,
him being his authentic self, showed me, right, that he apologized. The other thing is this. I believe it's easier to forgive when there's an incentive behind it, right? An incentive that's the purpose, right? And so I think it would be really hard for me to forgive the officer who shot me just for the sake of forgiving or to say I'm a good person.
Yeah.
Right? But connecting that to purpose, right, to find solutions to prevent this from happening to somebody else is what really, encouraged me and emboldened me to have this conversation and to move forward. And, oftentimes I see life through 2 different lenses. One, through the lens of purpose, right? And then 2, through the lens of being a human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm very intentional about feeling those human feelings, right? But then directing that energy into purpose. And that's where the Hair Foundation came from. It's one thing to be upset, right, and bitter and angry. It's another thing to feel those feelings fully and direct them in the direction of purpose. So when people see the Hair Foundation, oftentimes they think it just came from inspiration and hope. Yes, it came from inspiration and hope, but it also came from anger and frustration, right? Like, and though all those feelings can live at the same time, right? And when we're wise with those feelings, right, we can direct them to good.
Well, I'll tell you, what a life, what a process, what a story, what an example of what it means to be human. I believe that our ultimate project is to perfect our humanity.
Absolutely.
We are not dogs, cats, kangaroos, plants. We're human. We're the highest life form created. And you, my friend, have demonstrated humanity in ways that few people either have, can, or will. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Honored. Listen, I want you to get this book, An Unspeakable Hope by Leon Ford. And this is an example of saying yes when life says no. We'll be right back with closing remarks.
Through resilience and transformation, Leon Ford's story continues to inspire audiences everywhere. Discover his book, An Unspeakable Hope, or invite Leon for your next event at leonfordspeaks.com.
This is not the first time I've met Leon Ford, I've spoken with Leon Ford, and I've listened to his story. But today, Leon said some things that really impacted me in a unique way. He talked about this Olympics of defeat. I never thought about it that way, where people really do pile on and compete with each other over what's wrong either in their community or in their job or in their relationships. He talked about the accountability that was instilled into him by his grandfather. And it really reminded me of the influence that men have on men and that grandfathers. I had good relationships with my grandmothers, but grandfathers can play a role too. And then what really struck me was that here's a young man who is confined to a wheelchair the rest of his life, and therefore said that his key strategy is to think yes every day of his life when he wakes up. You may not be confined to a wheelchair, and I'm sure you were not shot 5 times in your back by a police officer, but I'm certain that life can be challenging enough for you to be inspired by the thought that every day when you wake up, you can say yes. You can be grateful for another day and another chance and another opportunity to make an impact on someone else's life. So whatever no has appeared in your life, either this month or today, say yes when life says no. Thank you for watching this show, Say Yes When Life Says No. Subscribe and stay tuned for future segments.